the largest protests that I've been to besides the Women's March. This time it's kids striking from school for climate change on the second-year anniversary of Hurricane Maria. There are over 1,000 actions happening in all 50 states and 150 worldwide. So this is a massive movement.
Now to the global protest that is underway right now. Students and workers all around the world are flooding the streets demanding action on climate change. Maggie Rulli is at a demonstration in London with the latest.
Michael, we're here with thousands of protesters right underneath Parliament. And what's so striking, besides just the sheer size of protesters here, are the age of people who are demonstrating. Almost all of them are students. This group behind me, just 9 years old. We spoke to a group of 17-year-olds who said they're here today to fight for their future. Now, the goal of this strike, and really all these strikes around the world, is to send a clear message to world leaders ahead of the UN Climate Summit happening this week in New York. And one of their many demands is to say they want to phase out all fossil fuels by 2030 and replace them with renewable energy. Now, another name that we've been hearing time and time again here in London this afternoon is they're talking about Greta Thunberg, that famous Swedish activist at just 16 years old has already become the face of this movement. She famously stepped out of class last year in Sweden for the first kind of solo climate strike, and now look at what her movement has become. We don't know exact numbers yet, guys, but it's looking like this will be the largest climate protest in our planet's history. Tom?
All right, Maggie Rulli for us. Maggie, thank you for that.
Sydney has been brought to a standstill by more than 80,000 people fired up over climate change. Many skipped the classroom to clam into the city, joining millions of people all around the world in the biggest protest yet over the state of our planet.
An extraordinary show of people power, their message deafening.
What do we want? Climate action! When do we want it now?
Climate Strike was the brainchild of a bunch of school children across the world, but it snowballed into one of the biggest demonstrations Sydney has seen in decades.
Stop the learning! Stop the learning!
As students swapped the classroom for the domain, the playground for the pavement.
We think not enough things have been done, and if no one will do anything, then we have to protest.
In their school uniforms, in one voice.
We've listened to the science, we learnt it at school, we're out here today demanding action and our government is not taking it.
The protest left the city at a standstill and shut down the CBD. A minor scuffle as they marched down Macquarie Street and rogue cars tried to inch through a sea of people. Despite the turnout, our politicians would prefer the public servants stayed at work.
I think these sorts of rallies should be held on a weekend and where it doesn't actually disrupt business.
And the kids stayed in school.
The biggest thing that students can do to help us tackle climate change is get a great education.
But the school kids had backup. Workers, mums, dads and our Pacific Islander neighbours.
We're marching for our children and grandchildren's future.
Many of the students here are too young to vote, but with a turnout as huge as this, their voices will be very hard to ignore. Do you think they'll do something?
Yes.
We want climate action! When do we want it now?
Sydney led the way, but the noise was just as loud in cities across the country.
What do you think of this younger generation?
Well, I'm very impressed by them. I think they know what they're talking about. They've done the research.
As the next generation stood up and were counted in numbers we don't often see.
And Deb, the scenes we saw in Sydney today are only just the beginning. It's a global day of action happening 3 days before the United Nations Climate Change Summit in New York. Around the world, it's expected millions more activists will turn out in droves in more than 100 other countries. Deb.
Enormous crowds. Lizzie, thank you.